Hello and welcome to my presentation Testing for Recruiters. So I gave this presentation a while back because I was asked by the company that put me with another company whether I could give a presentation for a couple of new fresh recruiters. They came fresh from the press. Now fresh from uni or secondary school. No, not secondary school probably, but fresh from uni. Where they learned their HR magic. And I thought this would be cool to also show to other people. So I think it's mostly interesting if you are a recruiter and you're trying to recruit testers. But I think it can also be interesting to people who are interested in testing, whether they want to find out it's something for them or not. So here goes nothing. Let's go right into it. So I think it's important to have an understanding of what is testing. First of all, of course, and there can be a lot of discussion of what is testing. This is just a workable theory from my end, and if there's experienced testers or someone who's big in quality assurance looking, I'm sure you have an opinion on this as well, which I'm happy to see below in the comments. But here's a shot from me, at least, to give some sort of definition. So, from my point of view, it's determining whether something, for instance, software is good or good enough. I will specifically talk about software testing in this online video presentation, but there can also be different ways of testing. A lot, actually. A lot of things that you even on a day-to-day basis indulge in. For instance, to check if cheese is to your taste. And when someone puts food for you on the table, you also test. If you go out for shoes, you will test whether the fit is nice and whether the look is good and whether it fits your particular requirements. So that's determining whether something is good enough. I usually do that with products that are already finished. So for instance, the cheese, you are not involved in the making of the process. You can, but usually not when you buy it from the supermarket. And also the shoe you will buy as a finished product, and then you will determine whether you like it or not. But testing can also be seen as making sure that during the development process, quality is built in. And that's why often the term quality assurance is used instead of tester, and quality assurance as a term is becoming more and more popular. At least that's why I think it's becoming more popular. So, for instance, Michael Jordan was, for instance, involved in the making of a particular Nike shoe, and so he was involved in the quality of the product during the test, during the development itself. So he gave feedback to those who were developing the shoe when the shoe was not finished yet, I suppose. At least that's how you should see it with software development. The product is not finished, or the piece of software is not finished, and the tester or quality assurance person gives feedback about the status, like what not just what they think, but also what they find. It is a science. It's not based on emotions or not solely based on emotions. And in terms of aesthetics or the way something looks and feels, can also be valuable feedback for a developer or a development team. And so assessing quality during the development of the product and after the development. So you still want to give feedback also when the shoe is lying in the store or when the product is finished, or a part of the product is finished. Then there are also different forms of testing, namely functional and non-functional testing are the two big pillars. Functional testing means that that software does what it's supposed to do in terms of function. So if you go to a web shop like Amazon, you want to make sure that you can view products, that you can put several products in the basket, and that you can buy them. These are just three very basic functions, and there are of course a whole list of sub functions that Amazon has or their web store has, and they need to work, of course. So that's functional testing. Does it work or not? Is what a functional tester continuously asks about certain functions or sub-functions. The non-functional testing is, as far as I understand, because I'm a functional tester, is security and performance. So of course, when you buy a product off of Amazon and you put in your credit card details, you want to make sure as a customer that your data is not stolen. So for instance, a security tester is involved with that particular piece of software. This particular niche, it's not really a niche, is much broader than that, but I am not very well versed in security testing, so I can't tell you a whole lot about it, but it exists, and it is there to protect your data or the company's data. My screen falls out because of the timer. That's annoying. Then non-functional testing. Another one is performance. So I'm going to use the web shop as another example for another example again. Namely, when you have Black Friday, for instance, and Amazon is expecting a lot of customers. For instance, 1 million customers come onto their website and order at the same time. Well, this might cause some trouble, and as a performance tester, you want to test the boundaries of what the software can and cannot do. So this person creates different scenarios and tests the system or the software for the performance. So bear in mind that those also exist. Now, it's also important to know who you have in front of you as a recruiter, but also important to know who you want to become as a tester. Do you have a traditional tester in front of you? And a traditional tester, I understand to mean someone who has worked in a waterfall environment. So this is an environment where a large list of requirements would come in from the business side of the corporation, and then it would be given to the developmental side of the corporation, and they would get 1, 2, or even more years to develop the product based on those requirements. And the tester would mostly at the end assess the quality of this particular product. What do they then do while the development team is busy? They would, for instance, design tests and already think about what to do when this product goes to market. But yeah, assessing the quality happens at the end of the whole developmental process. The antithesis of this is working in a Scrum or Agile environment. Scrum is a framework of how to work in an agile way. What this means is that the developmental process is much more incremental. So there's a quicker feedback loop. The tester assesses smaller pieces of software at a time, and hence gives feedback to both the business and the developers. And this is more and more becoming the norm in the industry. And what am I doing? And can the tester support the test work with test automation? So sometimes people like to make the distinction between manual testing, so that's with the mouse and keyboard, as sort of simulating a user, and make a difference between that and test automation. And sometimes people think that a tester does one or the other. And you have testers, manual testers, and test automators. It's a stupid distinction because they should both add to assessing quality. And with test automation, you cannot do with what you can do as a human being tester. And certain things you cannot do as a human being, and you can much more easily do with test automation. So it's also more and more expected that a tester can support their work with some test automation. So it's important to inquire when you're a recruiter. And it's also important to work on this, I think, if you want to become a competitive tester. Not in terms of competition between other testers. That would be an interesting competition. But I mean on the marketplace. How do you set yourself apart from other people is to also invest in test automation, but also keep on working and thinking critically about how you approach your work as a whole. And does a tester have experience with developmental methods and or requirements engineering? So I, for instance, have a little bit of experience with behavior-driven development because I find it very interesting. And that's outside of, very strictly speaking, outside of the scope of testing and is a bit broader than that. So I also might have an idea of how a developer could best do their work within that particular framework, such as behavior-driven development. And that has given me an idea of how developers work or could work. So I have a frame of reference when I see developers work. Requirements engineering is, so what I said before, the business comes with requirements, and then development side of the corporation has to come up with the implementation. But it's impossible or almost impossible to have that those requirements one-on-one translated to a direct implementation. You need to ask the business side, what do you mean? And then you can instruct, to say it with a bit of a charged term, the developmental side with the right, give them the right instructions. Or as a tester, you don't necessarily have to be in between that. Developers are not stupid, and the business side is also not always completely untechnical, so they can communicate with each other as well, of course. But as a tester, it's also important to get some information from there, because you will be the one verifying those requirements. So it's good if you have an understanding of them as well, at the least. It's important to know what the motivation is of the tester, and also as a tester, it's important to think about what your motivation is, because it will determine which environments you will thrive in. Or are you more interested in developing yourself? And this is something that I definitely recommend for beginning testers. Of course, money is nice, but experience is nicer, because it will make your work nicer, and it will also explain why you ask a little bit more of money afterwards. Like if you have no experience but you ask for a lot of money, then you cannot really explain why you ask for that kind of money. First, earn your stripes, so to say, and afterwards you can get a return on that particular investment. As a recruiter, I think it's also important to find out what the motivation of the tester is, because if they are not solely motivated by money, but they also want to develop themselves, they are not going to like it when they're put into an assignment where they cannot develop themselves. So this is something you should definitely ask because it's an intellectual profession. So yeah, don't be surprised if people want to develop themselves. And how quickly can a tester add value? So a couple of these questions are from the recruiters. Thank you, recruiters, or consultants, as they like to be called in that particular company. But I just put them in there. There's no copyright on these questions. So, how quickly can a tester add value? And in my opinion, a tester that asks the right questions can add value immediately, because they will have an idea of the developmental process. How do you do certain things? And just by inquiring, a lot of information can come to the surface, both for the tester but also for the team. People often work on assumptions, which is logical, but it's if you put those assumptions to light, and just by asking about them, people might think, oh, we can do this in a different or a better way, or we should at least try. So in that sense, I think a tester can immediately add value. And you don't need a whole lot of experience to do that, asking the right questions. Just stop and think for a second and write stuff down. Be a listener in a meeting and not try and put your mark immediately. I think that can really help. And a tester, they can also partially answer these questions that he or herself has asked. They can add value continuously. I added partially because as a tester, you cannot answer all questions that you pose, I suppose. Some questions are very specific to, for instance, the developer or the product owner or the Scrum Master, but also to test. And it's good to also ask those questions to the whole team, even though you can answer it best in terms of test, because you want to involve people. And we get down to that in the next slide. And what are indicators of a tester that adds value? These are, of course, no guarantees, because a tester does not work on themselves. No tester is an island. But indicators are better cooperation between the asking and making part, so the business and the developmental team. There are less production issues because there's more quality control. Better customer satisfaction, hopefully, because customers get what they want without bugs, for instance. And if the tester has also, or the product owner has inquired what the customer wants, then they're more likely to get what they want. A faster time to market and software of better quality. Of course, this is not solely dependent on the tester, but on the team or company as a whole. But a good quality assurance process will help achieve these points. How does a tester get a team to share the same vision? And this has nothing to do with the act of persuasion per se, or at least not nothing, but not solely with the act of persuasion. I think it's very important to also develop yourself in your soft skills as a software tester, also as a developer, by the way, but also by developing yourself in a broad way in your profession as a tester. So, as I said before, sometimes people will dive into only test automation, but lose sight of testing strategies. So, I think it's much better if you develop in a broad way, and so you can offer your services, and that might be that you're very good at test automation, but that you can also be critical of the way how test automation is incorporated in the overall test strategy. Because if you are just there like a tool for a problem, you are used as a tool for a problem, then yeah, what is your vision in the first place? If you have an idea about how your test automation can be put to the best use, yeah, then you already have a certain vision, I think, and then you can also partake in discussions about it, and you can carry that forward and with you, and show it to others. Of course, as a freelance tester or as a tester with a secondment company, you've seen how companies go about testing and the problems involved in testing in different ways, and that experience is very, very valuable. And I've noticed that people, team members or people in the organization, like to hear about the lessons that you've learned. So, of course, if they run into the same problems, then they want to have a quick solution. They don't want to go and reinvent the wheel if someone already has the answer. So, if you can provide that, then kudos for you. You'll be appreciated, and people will listen to you, and of course, they will share your vision much quicker, at least. I think what's also important is that as a tester, you listen to the exact source of problems and be coming up with fitting solutions. Of course, this does not just go for software tester, but also goes for developers, and perhaps also other professions. But I'm limiting myself to these two because I see that sometimes testers, and myself included, hear a certain problem, but that's not necessarily the problem that has been stated to them, and they come up with a solution that they like the best. So they might have a bias for a certain tool, and that might not be what the team needs at that particular moment. So try to be aware of your own biases in terms of methodologies and tools and technologies, and ask yourself, okay, I want to use this particular tool, but is that really what the team needs? And is this even the problem that they have? So be critical of that. The last one, I think it's very important to be flexible and serviceable to the goal that the team has in mind. You might have a certain goal and a certain vision, and you might want to push it through because that's the best way, and you know it's the best way because that's how you've done it in previous companies, and it proved to work 100% of the time. But it's not going to work if you create resistance because of that straightforward approach. So be serviceable and be flexible, and try and find out what the goal of the team is. And it might not even be so obvious, but if you can find that out and you can help the whole team get closer to that goal, you will be appreciated, I'm sure. All right. What makes a good tester or test manager? So I have to give a shout out to Erik de Graaf, former colleague of mine whom I worked with at Alten. He said, work like tomorrow will be your last day, or work like today will be your last day, which he meant to mean that you should put down the stuff that you do. For instance, the tests, at least that's what I interpreted him to me. Just make sure that there's enough documentation for someone who might take over your job tomorrow because you are ill or something else. And this person comes in, opens their laptop, and they just need to know where to look in the test management tool or whatever. And there are, for instance, regression tests already there, so they have an understanding of how the system sort of works a little bit. And they also have access to the work that needs to be done on that particular day. And the rest of the team is able to help him or her out. So they need some background information and stuff like that. So it's a continuous process that you record tests, that you record what needs to be done and stuff like that. So someone has generally a very good idea of what you do and what they need to do in order to assure the quality or assess the quality of the software. Then, sorry, they should also be proactive and astute. With the latter, I mean to be critical. As a tester, you're sort of expected to think outside of the box. The developers are very good at solving problems and coming up with a solution. And as a tester, you're sort of expected to find the caveats and support them in that sort of way. Like, have you thought about this? And can this go wrong? If I press this button, what happens then? So yeah, you will find that you will often ask a lot of questions, which some people might find annoying, but it's necessary to make sure that the quality is as good as it gets. Of course, asking questions also has its limits. So don't think that if more questions is necessarily better. Asking the right questions, and that's an art that you need to develop. Then the last question was, how is your role viewed within the organization? I have to admit this really varies from unnecessary cost to essential for adding value to the organization. So I've been on projects where, I don't know, some top up manager decides we need to hire this many testers and just make it happen, put them in the teams, and I don't want to hear anything about it anymore. So then the people within the team don't really see the added value of a tester. I've also had it where there was a top-down decision to have more testers, and initially you come into a team and then people don't really see why what you are doing there, but eventually through your work they do. Which is great, of course, if you can convince people that you are valuable. Not necessarily great that you have to convince people in the first place, because sometimes it doesn't work. I've had developers who didn't see the added value, even though they made mistakes. So yeah, but it often depends strongly to whom you speak in your organization. And one more note on the relationship between testers and developers. I think traditionally seen, they are seen as like cats and dogs, like they clash all the time. But that's not my experience so much, at least not in the previous company I worked in, and in my current company. CarNext was my previous one, and APG is my current one. A little bit of advertisement here, but CarNext is bust anyway. But it really speaks to the environment. It was an agile environment, a previous employer, and they're trying to get there. At APG is a much bigger company, and I see that developers and testers are much more working together, which is a really nice position to be in. So because it's very complex work, I need information from the developer in order to do my work, and I can help the developer as a tester in order for them to do their work better. Of course, I can't code or stuff like that. What the software that they are developing, but yeah, you really help each other stay sharp and informed. So I hope you enjoyed this particular presentation. If you are a recruiter or somewhere in the testing, someone who is willing to go into test or wants to go into test, someone who's a test buff, I'm really curious about your feedback, whether this has helped you or not, or helped you in understanding a bit more about the industry. So let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching.